Hello, friends. This is People Are Interesting with Jan K. In each episode of this show, unique individuals share stories that take us on a ride across ideas and places, featuring crocodile attacks in Indonesia, escaping war-torn Lebanon, and shark protection schemes in Mauritania. This podcast takes you where you've never been before. Enjoy and thank you for joining the club. How old were you when you first started surfing?
I think I was 15, and to be honest, it was a bit of like growing up on the beach, we were always looking for activities to do, whether it was building sandcastles
Mm.
or snorkeling, and then we got a canoe and we started getting into that, and then it was like, hey, what about surfing? So then we all we had a group of three friends. It was me, my best friend, and then another guy, and
Right.
we all at the same time decided let's try surfing, and our birthdays are all around the same time, and our parents all gave us a surfboard for our 15th birthday.
I
It was
love
just
that.
like, okay guys, this is your new activity, and that's literally what it was. We would take the boards and go to the west coast.
What kind of a board would you get?
It
What was your
was
first board?
it was the same one I still kind of have. It's like one of those foam boards, right? It's like long,
Mm-hmm.
very easy. It's one of those beginner boards. And
Perfect.
we never did any lessons. We literally just went into the ocean because we thought, like, we're so comfortable in the ocean. We
Mm-hmm.
will figure it out. It wasn't like anything scary to us at the time, which is quite interesting because I think for a lot of people, like surfing is like a huge challenge, and then there's so many factors to take into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And then for us, it was just like such a normal thing. Like we're in the ocean again, but we have a different tool to play with. Like it's not surf,
Right.
which was yeah, we just like messed around the whole summer. I don't think any of us ever really picked up any technique. Like none of us were aware of what we were doing, but it was fun.
That's interesting. So, because it's quite different to my first experiences with surfing, where I just took a few lessons and, understood let's say the basics of the technique, how to stand up on the board and and the basics of the basics. How long did it take you to catch your first wave?
um, to be honest, like I said, we were just like messing around. And if you look back at the photos, like you definitely do see us stand up. And I think that's also like a thing when you're young and you're confident, like things just like flow so much better because
Hmm.
you don't have that fear factor that stops you from like making those like little mistakes, as in like deciding to not pop up on the wave because it's a bit too big. You just do it and it happens and it's like good.
Hmm.
Um, but then after once I wanted to get a bit better at surfing, get
Hmm.
progress to a smaller board and stuff, I started realizing like my technique was absolutely terrible. And
Hmm.
that's when I started doing, more lessons. And
Hmm.
then they were like, yeah, you're so messy. You're popping up with both your left and your right foot interchangeably. Like, what?
Hmm.
I,
Oh.
yeah, I did not have like a set way of popping up, and it drove my teachers. Like I had a few different ones, and it drove them crazy. I remember especially the one in the Philippines. He's like, "What are you doing? Like just choose one leg, because then we can focus on making it better."
Right.
Uh, so yeah, that's definitely the bad thing of like just starting randomly.
Mm. So, can I ask you, do you snowboard as well?
No, I don't. I always skied. I
Oh,
always
I see.
yeah, but no.
Yeah, because in snowboarding, kind of like in surfing, you have a leading leg, right? The one that is standing on the front of the board. So I thought that maybe, you know, because it's very interesting that you're so, in a way, versatile, that you would do one, like, because usually one person will have one side of their body will be better coordinated than the other one, right? But for you, it wasn't
Yeah,
an issue.
No, I don't. But the thing is, I wasn't even aware that I was doing it, and only once someone was like actually observing me catch waves and was trying to help me with my technique, that he was so puzzled. Like, how are you just like interchanging on the waves? And it
Mm.
wasn't even that much on the wave. It was literally just whatever my brain decided to do. Like,
Yeah, what seemed more reasonable? But
like,
would it sorry. Go on.
yeah. No, 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 that was it.
And in terms of your first spots, surfing spots, where would you go?
Um, the West Coast. So Praia do Amado.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that has always been like our go-to surf spot. Um, and yeah, even now it's like every time you go there, you get like very excited because you just like have so many cool memories there.
Mm.
And this beach can either be like very, very easy beginner waves and you just like mess around, and sometimes it can be like very wild and a lot of current, and you never
Mm-hmm.
really know what you're in for. So when you drive up, I used to always get a bit nervous because I was like, oh God, what kind of day is it going to be like?
Mm-hmm. So you would go to the West Coast, because my understanding of, and maybe you can actually, explain it way better than me. In Algarve, there isn't around Faro, let's say, there really isn't surfing during the summer, right?
No, absolutely not. And the same in, Albufeira and stuff. It's very rare. Um, Recently, actually, like after, like in the late summer, so let's say September, October, the weather was still amazing in Portugal, and we used to go surfing close, like the closest beach to my house, which is literally like less than 10 minutes away, and there were waves, and that was so cool because then you're the only people in the water there. You're like the local
Mm.
surfers.
Mm.
Whereas like those bigger surf spots, it's quite crowded. Yeah, Portugal
Yeah.
really is like a surf hub in Europe. So
Are the conditions any different between, let's say, winter? Because my understanding is that around November in Algarve, the swell moves in southward and you get better waves in Algarve. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, you do. It gets like it can get quite like choppy the waves and quite rough. And
Mm-hmm.
as the water also gets like so much colder, so all of those factors and the currents are very strong. Like that
Mm-hmm.
really like plays into, you have to be a good surfer to surf those conditions.
And are there, because in Faro it's a beach break. Are there
Yeah.
any is it the same in all Portugal?
Yeah, mostly. It's like really rare for it not to be a beach break. Um, you have this one spot also on the west coast, and it's kind of it looks a bit like a port, like the boats
Mm-hmm.
come in and then you jump from the port and you go into the water and then you paddle out and there's a
Mm-hmm.
bridge there,
Oh.
but it still like ends up going to land,
Mm-hmm.
so technically it is in a way a beach break, but yeah, I
Well,
think
because you surfed on beach breaks and on, what is it called, the reef break, the point break,
yeah, the reef break,
the
yeah,
reef break, right?
yeah. I think point break is just like the point where the wave breaks.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So how were your experiences of doing the beach break and reef break compare? What's different? Because I only tried beach break.
Yeah, so the thing with reef is that you really, really have to be careful because, yeah, the reef is extremely sharp, and a lot of the
Mm.
spots that I surfed, it was reef break, but it was also very shallow.
Mm.
And, when you're on the board and you catch your wave, like, it's just normal that when you fall off, you fall backwards or you dive forwards, and that's like a huge no-no because you can literally like if you dive forwards, you could potentially hit the reef, and yeah, it would completely like mess you up. That place I was in the Philippines, there were so many reef breaks, and like most of the local people had massive scars, like either on their back or their face, or like I think everyone had some reef scar. And I remember the first time I served a reef break. Obviously, they told me they were like, "Be careful of that," but I didn't understand the seriousness of it. And I caught a wave. I remember I was standing, and I was so excited that I, managed to catch the wave. Then when I, kind of like the wave lost momentum, I kind of decided to like dive into the water. Like I thought, oh, it's gonna be super smooth, and I get up,
Whoops.
and like all the surfers were screaming at me, and I was like, what the fuck? Sorry, what
Mhm.
did I do? And they all told me like you cannot do that. That could literally like hurt, like you could hurt yourself so badly because they're very sharp and it's
Mhm.
shallow. And
And when you
yeah,
say shallow, what do you mean by shallow?
as in like from the second you go into the water and where the reef is, like there's
Hmm.
not a difference. So there's a
But
very
would that be a meter, half a meter, 20 centimeters, 2 meters?
I don't know. I think it really depended on where you went and like the tide and everything. But yeah, it was really easy to get very hurt. And also when you get off and you think like, let's say you have your board on top of the water and that normal thing you do, which is like you kick off in the water and you try and get up on your board.
Mm-hmm.
If there's reef under you and you kick the reef, like I had so many cuts on my feet,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so sharp, it like really slices your skin. And
Oof.
it's just like, yeah, you don't feel it when you're in the water because the adrenaline of the waves and all of that. But then once you're out and you look at your feet, you're full of cuts. And they really call that like a beginner's injury because you're just not used to the reef and being careful. And yeah, it's really annoying in those tropical places because the cuts never really heal, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're out all day, and then they stay open and they get infected, and it's not very nice.
Yeah, actually, my girlfriend told me that she was in Vietnam and she scratched her knee and she ended up, because it wasn't healing at all, she had to take antibiotic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like super dangerous because it's very humid and hot, and
Is,
yeah.
so is it because of the weather, the temperature, or the bacteria there just because you're not from there, you're not used to it at all?
I think it's probably a combination, but it's definitely hard for your cuts to close if you're either constantly in the water or you're in a climate where it's super humid.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Needs that dryness to like close. Um, and then on top of that, yeah, there's probably like a lot of bacteria and stuff out there that you're not used to. So there's a high chance of that getting you.
Yeah. I'm I'm thinking I remember when we talked about I had this moment when I was absolutely fascinated by saltwater crocodiles. Maybe you remember.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where were you? Where this surfing guide was telling you that a croc snatched some villager like last
Yeah,
week or something like that?
yeah, I was in Sri Lanka, and what happens in Sri Lanka? There's a lot of like, yeah, I guess I'm not sure what the technical term for it is, but you've got like a river and it goes into the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of surf breaks around those spots, or you have to, paddle over them in order to get to a break.
Mm-hmm.
And what would happen is that like the crocodiles would sometimes end up in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we were paddling to go to a break, and she was always like very like not serious about anything, and all of a sudden we're paddling. She screams over to us. She's like, "Stop, stop, don't move." And we're all just like, "Okay, what's going
Oof.
on?" And some people kept paddling. They're like, "Whatever." And she's like, "No, no, no." And then we're all just like frozen, and she like paddles forward and then like goes to check and then paddles back to us. She's like, "Okay, guys, try and paddle as fast as you can, but without any sudden movements."
Mm.
And we're just like, what the fuck is going on? And then she told us that like a week before that, a surfer had been attacked because there was a crocodile in a spot, and yeah, they managed to take the crocodile out, and it was like massive. And
Oh, I only
yeah,
want to say like one thing. Fuck that. Oh, that is so crazy.
you know, sometimes in those moments it's kind of surreal to you, especially because I don't know, I never really like it hasn't ever crossed my mind crocodiles are a danger when you're surfing. So even
Hmm.
when you get the first warning, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, shit, but like, yeah, no, it's not really there. Whereas, like, for example, sharks is something that's so fed into your mind from like movies and just like, I think it's definitely like a constant fear in the water, especially when like it's kind of like getting darker and stuff. It's something you think about. So if someone were to say, hey, there's a shark, like obviously major panic, but if someone was like, hey, a crocodile, I think it wouldn't like make that instant connection.
Right, but it's weird because crocodiles are actually meaner than sharks, I would say.
Yeah, they're completely like they're out to actually like eat you, right? And
Yeah.
they also like drown their prey first, and they take you
Mm.
to water, and there's like no way of like getting out of that. Whereas exactly a shark, I don't think they're that out there to eat you. It's usually
No.
like, yes, they're either confused, they bite and let go, and yeah, you if you're lucky, you lose a limb. But yeah, they would not drag you in the water and like
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing, I have basically 2 points to add, the one on crocodiles and the other one on sharks. So the crocodiles, I don't know if you've seen this movie Crocodile Dundee. Have you seen it?
I have not.
Anyway, it's this Australian crocodile hunter, and he's explaining to this girl how, and I'm guessing he's trying to impress her in the movie. He's telling her how the crocodiles prey on their victims. So he's saying that exactly they will drag you under the water and tumble you along the riverbed or the on you know in the mud, and then they will like basically store you somewhere there for later. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I mean. I would say that this guy is not as legit as Sir David Attenborough, but but
Yeah, but oh my god, no.
yeah. And the other thing that I find in a way it's terrifying is there's this famous beach in Australia. What is it called? What do you know it?
One day, one day.
Yeah, exactly that one where they had shark nets since the 30s.
Yeah, exactly.
Oof.
Yeah, in
But it
Canada. Yeah.
because it's so unfortunate because the surfer, when you're paddling and just lying on the board, you basically look like a seal apparently to the shark.
Yeah,
He can't tell
absolutely.
any difference.
Yeah, and especially if you're wearing like a black wetsuit, a rubbery substance. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What what is because you've obviously surfed in a few locations around the world, right? What is the surfing culture different in every place you would go to, or are there some overarching themes, or is it a bit of both? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I think like um usually in surfer spots like there's that instant like chillness, right?
Mm,
Most people are very laid back, and
mm-hmm.
that's definitely like a common theme. It's like people that are very like easygoing in the sense that they just like appreciate the more simple things. Like whereas other people might be going crazy about jobs, making money, these people are really out there to enjoy an activity in nature. And they also tend to like these spots tend to have people that just like really respect nature in that way. And you know surf spots in itself aren't always like that luxurious. It's all very like simple. um Something also that's not that nice but also happens is now like with traveling and stuff, people go to different surf spots, right? And you could get, let's say, like really good surfers from God knows where, like let's say Australia, and they decide to go to the Philippines, and they come there and they're like, yeah, this is the ocean, so we're just gonna surf as if we surf the way we do at home, and that tends to cause a lot of tension with the local people because they're like, hey, listen, this is our beach break or reef point, and you can't just come here and do whatever you want. So then you do sometimes see the tensions in the water where it gets like
Mhm.
quite, they're very protective over their waves. So that's also like a common theme, I think, with most surf spots, where you have the local versus the foreigner.
I have actually this is something that I find quite interesting. Why do you think the locals, because you won't, for example, have in ski resorts like locals from the area will be like, this is our slope, what are you guys doing here? But it's definitely a thing with surfing.
Yeah, I think like obviously on with surfing, whenever a wave comes, like it's really hard for two, three people to surf the same wave and get the same experience out of it. Whereas like on a mountain, like you definitely can just like go a bit more to the left, a bit more to the right, and it's like semi same experience. So like with surfing, like priority on the wave is very important, and you've got your surf etiquette, and
Hmm.
you can't just like drop in on someone, and there's like a like a if you really know the rules of the water, which sometimes is a little confusing, but I had this one really cool surf instructor, and she's like, okay, yeah, it's great to know all the techniques about what you do when you're on the board, but it's also really important to like know the surf etiquette and also to read the ocean, which I think is like the hardest part of surfing. And she tried to explain to us a bit like, if you're coming to a beach, to a point where it's different waves and you have never been there before and they're local people, like they definitely have priority over you because, you know, you can't just come there and start taking their waves. Like it's
Hmm.
also, you have to be a bit respectful, and sometimes it's actually nice when you come up to them and you're like, hey, do you have any tips, like where's the current coming from, or try and make a conversation, and then
Yeah.
so much better than just to come there and act like you know the ocean, like they know the ocean, and then just take the waves as they come.
What's the difference in terms of, the waves between different surfing spots? How the waves can differ from one another?
So, for example, in Sri Lanka, the waves were quite big, but they weren't very powerful. So,
Hmm.
you'd see this massive wave come, and she would be like, just paddle, just do it. And then I would be so scared because it was so big, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna, get all screwed up. And she's like, Kira, they're not as like powerful as they look. And she was so right. You do it, and then obviously you'd be so scared, and then you're actually on the wave, and you realize, well, I should have paddled more because I lost power.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes in Portugal, for example, you're like, oh, that's a medium-sized wave, and then you get it, and it screws you over completely because there's just so much power in it, and you get dragged down, and like it's like a washing machine underwater.
Yeah, that's true. Or they will fold really quickly, so there isn't a lot of time to kind of like catch them and get on it. That would be something I noticed. I think in Portugal, or maybe it's just a general thing about the beach breaks, is no two waves are the same, right? Because the wind constantly changes and
Yeah, yeah, and that's like why it's so important to just like keep practicing, because then you start having a bit more experience and on how to read a wave and like know what you can expect and stuff, which is like the hardest part I find.
yeah, definitely. If you have a reef break, are they much more similar? You know what to expect way quicker.
Mm, no, I don't think so. I I remember when I went to these spots, like there was definitely, I chose to have an instructor in these spots because I was just like very aware of, how different the oceans were and how yeah, dangerous it is. Just like even if you might be like a really good surfer, like you really don't understand where the reef is or where the current flows,
Mm.
you know, how to get to spots. And imagine you catch a wave in a reef break and you need to know what the quickest way is to paddle back to the break. And those are like things you can't really find out by yourself, I think,
Yeah, you
unless you're
wouldn't have enough
really
time.
really good. Yeah, exactly.
Fair. What about some of your scary experiences surfing? Have you had
Mm.
any?
Yeah, I've
But
had
for the crocodile, that that could basically close this topic by itself. But maybe there's more.
yeah, no, I remember also this one time in Sri Lanka, and like I had been there for almost 2 weeks, and yeah, I really felt like it was cool that they were constantly, pushing us to, go higher, like as in like bigger waves and smaller boards. And um I then she took me to this point where it's like it was like very very good surfers, everyone's very experienced. And I was there, I was on a shorter board, I didn't really feel that comfortable yet, and the waves were really big. And I just got very scared because I didn't feel like I was ready for that point. And
Mm.
you know the waves kept coming, and I would get so scared, and then you're screwed either way. So she was like, yeah, well, you're gonna completely get like taken out by this wave, so you might as well try. And I remember I had a few moments of that, and then you're trying, and then you completely just like full, and you swallow so much water, and you're like, oh, it's just. And then I was just so scared, and then the surfing wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
And
Have you had any bad wipeouts?
yeah, I have. I definitely have. And also once in the Philippines, I had a really bad wipeout, and I remember even thinking like, I don't even know if I'm gonna like manage to get up,
Mm-hmm.
which is like not a really nice feeling to have. And yeah, for me, always surfing was something to like just like have fun with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll ever be a good surfer because I don't have that like will to like push through like very uncomfortable situations where like of course I like being challenged a little, but I would not actively seek out like dangerous situations just to like keep progressing and progressing and progressing.
Mm.
Like I'd rather just if I know how to pop up and I like a long board and I like mellow waves, then that's so fine for me. I don't have
Yeah.
to keep climbing up that ladder.
I think that's really good that you kind of know what works for you and you know how to how to get it. I think it's because otherwise you would be probably anybody would be on a path to be basically make yourself unhappy, which I think a lot of people accidentally do, right? Because you think, oh, if I, let's say, I want this job because it like pays a lot or whatever. But oftentimes it won't be actually what you want in life. But you just this need to progress all the time. It's a bit of an ego thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I really agree. And you really get caught up in it. And yeah, it's almost a natural thing for like us not to be satisfied with where we're at. And yeah, it's really a shame because I remember I would that particular moment in Sri Lanka, like I paddled out to the side and I was like literally shaking from fear. And then I was like trying to ground myself. I was like, look around you, there's like crystal blue water and there are white beaches. You're in Sri Lanka, like, just like, appreciate the things. And then I realized, like, yeah, I can appreciate the things, but like on my terms. Like, I'm not gonna, just force myself to be
That's
out there.
very smart.
And so I went to the beach and I sat down, and the instructor came up to me. She's like, yeah, she was like always on that like pushing kind of thing. But then
Mm.
I told her, I was like, yeah, I'm just not enjoying it. And she's like, well, yeah, that's super cool that you came out because yeah, I'm also here to like, I want you to have fun because surfing is fun, and that's why I have, the surfing spot here, because I want, to share the stoke.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's very important, just to keep it real with yourself and your limits.
Yeah, and just to get the idea, which countries did surfing take you to?
So Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and then Malaysia as well, which isn't really like a crazy surf spot or scene, but it was really cool because I had a friend in Singapore and he was really into surfing and stuff, and he would
How
always like,
convenient.
yeah, exactly. Any chance he had, he would take his car and go with his friends, and they would drive for like say 4 hours, and they'd be in Malaysia, and there was like a beach break there, and that was really nice too because it was like a much like calmer scene because you don't have a lot of surfers there, so there's not that much pressure, and it's just like a little bit more
Mhm.
easy
Mhm.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, now that it made me think about where were you where you took a ferry to the wrong island or something like that? Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, it was my friend's birthday, and her mom, because yeah, it was the first time she was never at home for her birthday. And my mom was like, "Yeah, I really want you to still have a nice birthday." So we have these timeshare spots on this little island near Singapore, and it belongs to Indonesia. She's like, it would be cool if you could choose two friends and then you spend the weekend there. Like, mom and dad would really want you to have a good time.
Mhm.
And he told us, and we were like, oh my God, yes, we're so down. Let's take the ferry. Let's go to Indonesia. Let's have a little weekend getaway. And
Wow.
yeah, it was really exciting.
Sounds
And
amazing.
they went a day before me because I still had classes on the Friday. And
Mm.
my plan was to just, finish classes and then grab my bag, go to the terminal, take the ferry, and go. But first of all, like I finished classes, grabbed my bag, and I completely like miscalculated how far the port was from where I was at. So,
Mm-hmm.
and also for some reason, it never crossed my mind that like the same way you don't show up at the airport like 2 minutes before the flight, like you should not show up for your ferry 2 minutes before the ferry. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why that did not cross my mind, but anyway, I had like very little time to actually get there, and then um, Singapore has like it's kind of like a tube system, and from one side where I was, which is like the last stop, to like the other like the furthest stop there, where the ferry was, is like 2 hours, and I was like, how did I not think of this? So I was like, I did a bit of it in the tube, and then I grabbed an Uber, and then um, we almost like we just made it, and I get there, and they're like, yeah, the ferry's literally about to leave, and I was like, can you just ask them to wait? I really need to get on this boat. And they were like, and I was like, please. And they were like, okay, we'll call the captain. So they call the captain. They're like, there's one passenger here, and she wants to know if you can wait for her.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, yeah, 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 we wait. So then I had to like do the classic Kira thing where I have to beg everyone to like pass the security, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I had to do that. And then in Singapore, I had already like registered a finger scan. So like that was like my way of like identifying myself. But because I was so nervous and stuff, my fingers were super sweaty, and like it kept failing. And so I in this booth with this officer, and like it was already a scene because I had to beg everyone to pass them. And then there's like the little captain. He's like, "Where's the passenger? Where's the passenger?" And I'm like, "I'm here." Like, there. And then I get out, and he's like, "Where's your husband?" And I'm like, "He's on the island. Just get me to the island." Like,
That's
okay,
hilarious.
yeah, we get you to your husband. I was like, yes. So, Anyway, I get into the boat and like first of all, I'm like literally the only female in this boat, and I'm just like, okay, that's strange. Um, and it was like one of those really like rundown ferries, but at the time I was like not even questioning it. I was just like, whatever. I got on the boat. I'm gonna see my friends soon. It's gonna be fine. And we're in the boat, and it starts raining like crazy. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. I'm in the boat. It's cool. Um, then we had like 2 3 hours to go, and yeah, we get there, and I'm like, oh, finally, you know. And I look, and I'm like, well, that's not what I was expecting. And it's this like tiny, tiny little fisherman village.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, what? So I get out the boat, and like everyone in this village is looking at me. And like, there's like no one spoke any English. It was just like, oh my God, where am I? It's like pouring rain. There were no taxis, there was no one to talk to. And
Wow.
I was just like, oh my God, this is so strange. So this one guy comes up to me and he was like, hey, you look very lost in English. And I was like, oh my God, he speaks English. And I was like, yes, I am indeed very lost. I was like, I need to get here. And I just see his face kind of like smirk, but also like very like, you poor child kind of expression.
Right.
And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that's like the other side of the island. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you went to the wrong port. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, how do I get there? And he's like, yeah, it's 7 hours. I was like, 7 hours. I was like, can I not, get back on the boat? And the boat was already leaving again. He's like, no, that's going to go back to Singapore. I was like, well, how, very naive again. I was like, well, is there any buses or stuff I can take? And they're like, no, this is like a little tiny Indonesian island. There are no buses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And then I was just like, okay, I just need to sort this out. And meanwhile, I have like a whole crowd around me, like really
Mm-hmm.
like watching like what's going on.
Oh wow.
I like call my friend and I'm like, hey guys, um, yeah, there's a bit of an issue. They're like, what? I was like, yeah, I'm apparently not at the port you guys, got off at. They're like, where are you? And then I told them, and I checked on the map, and it was like literally 6 hours away. And, there's no taxis or anything like that. And they're like, oh my God, what can we do? And then, yeah, my phone also started like cutting a
Oh
little
my God.
because Portuguese phone and it wasn't working properly. And I was just like,
Right.
oh my
So
God.
spiraling down.
Literally. And um, then I start talking with this guy. I think he really started to feel for me. And, even though I was like very stressed, I was still making a conversation with this guy where it's like, yeah, I'm from the Netherlands. He's like, you're here by yourself. I'm like, yeah, I'm studying here. I just, I've got my friends on the other side and I don't really want to know what I'm going to do. And yeah, then at one point he was like, hey, listen, I think I'm going to, try and help you. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, I can organize a car and I'll drive with you there. And I was so desperate that I was just like, I was like, yeah, fine. I didn't even question like, what is it going to be like with like a strange man for 6 hours in a car going through the jungle.
Jesus
Um,
Christ.
he was so desperate, and I was like, yeah, money wise, I literally only have 50 Singapore dollars. Like, I'm a student, like, I really don't have more. And he's like, yeah, okay, okay, it's okay. So then he's like, okay, just wait here. So I was waiting in the rain, and then I was like, okay, this guy completely ditched me. Um, and then he comes back and he's like, come, come, come. So I'm like, all right. So we're just like running in the rain for this little village. And
Mhm.
eventually there's a car, and I just get in the car and we start driving. And we drove for 6 hours through like literal like jungle with like mountains, and it was so dark and it was so
Wow.
insane. But like throughout the whole journey, I started like talking to this guy, and he told me so much about Indonesia, and
Hmm.
it was so cool. He told me about his family, the political situation, the food, the different islands. There was just so much he was, telling me about, and I was really driving through the real part of the island, because eventually when I got to the part where my friends were at, it was like one of those like typical tourist, resort destinations, and nothing there would make you think like you're on a different side of the world. Like everything was the
Mm,
exact same, where what it could be in Portugal or whatever.
yeah.
And yeah, then I found Bobby, that was his name, and you know, he was so sweet. He was like, yeah, you seem like someone who gets in trouble a lot. So
He
if
said
you,
that.
yeah, it's like
That's
if you ever
hilarious.
need help, just call Bobby in Indonesia. And yeah, it was like a really cool experience in the end. But yeah,
Love that.
yeah, it was crazy because when you're so desperate, you will literally just get into a car with anyone. And I think also like I really listened to my intuition, where I just felt like this was a really solid person, and everything turned out to be okay.
Yeah, no, I remember you told me the story the first time. I was just terrified. But one thing that I find really interesting is something that you've mentioned when you were telling the story is how different the islands are. Do you remember anything from what he told you? Because that sounds, there's so many islands in Indonesia. I would imagine that.
So, the first thing is they all speak different languages. So, whenever they meet, it's like they tend to communicate in English, or um, the main language, which I think is like the one they speak in Jakarta. But even that is like harder for them. I think most might, because a lot of them work in tourism, so maybe English is easier for them. So they have a hard time communicating with each other. And yeah, plus they live quite far away from each other, and they don't really visit each other. So it's really like when they meet, it's so, yeah, I don't know. The way he described it is just like a bit of a barrier between them. And I remember he was mentioning, he's like, "Have you been to Indonesia before?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I've been to Bali." And he's like, "That's not Indonesia." He's like, "Have
Mm.
you been to Indonesia?" I was like, "No, I guess I haven't then." There's definitely like within Indonesia, people feel like Bali has completely been taken over by foreigners, which unfortunately is a bit true. But
Was that your impression as well?
yeah, so the first time I went there was I think in 2016 or 17 with a friend, and at that point I think it was already starting to get like Instagram traveling started to become a bit more of a thing, and Bali like catered to everything, the hotels, the pools, the food, and the Instagram photos were just like constantly popping up of Bali. And before going there, I had never really heard of it, which is like
Mm-hmm.
crazy, because this trip I took with my friend, we decided one day before going that we were just going to fly to Singapore. And so it was like a very, very spontaneous trip. And then we were in Singapore, and we are like, okay, well, it's been 4 days. We've seen pretty much at the time what we thought everything. And we are like, what should we do? And we start looking, well, what flights are available for tomorrow morning? And Bali was one. And we were like, well, it's like none of my family members have ever been to Indonesia. And I was like, well, my family members, especially my grandmother, she was in love with Indonesia. And there's also like some family connection, like some bloodlines that tie to Indonesia. So I was like, well, let's just go.
Mm-hmm.
And we got there, and it was so beautiful. And yeah, I really felt like it had so much like character to um, the island. And then when I went again, which was only like 2 years later, I went by myself, and yeah, it was completely different. And
Really?
yeah, I think in the 2 years, there was already a massive difference in like how many people were going to Bali, and also what kind of people were going, because the more flights there are, the cheaper they are, so more people have a chance to go to Bali, and
Mm-hmm.
more hotels were being built. So there was like a huge influx of people. And I remember also when I spoke to the local people the first time and then the second time, there was
Mm-hmm.
a huge difference in their approach towards like a foreigner. The
Mm-hmm.
first time it was very like they wanted to talk to you and they wanted to, learn from you, and it was a very different experience. And the second time, you were
Kids
definitely
wanted to take photos with you because you were white.
yeah. Well, the second time it was definitely more like we have accepted the fact that our island is kind of being taken over by tourism, so you are literally just a source of income, and it was really hard to like get anyone to like talk to you or open up to you. And I remember um I had like there the Uber was, you could sit on top like on the back of a scooter,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be like your Uber to get through to places. And I remember this one time, this guy picked me up, and we were just talking a bit, and I told him that I was studying, and then he was so like in awe of that, and he's like, oh, I wish, I could do that. I wish I was smart enough. And, he wanted to be a lawyer and he wanted to study English, and he had to, work as a Grab, like an Uber driver, because
Yeah.
the option he had. And in his head, it was because he wasn't smart enough. Like he
Mm.
looked at me and he was like, you've got it all figured out. You're smart. And then I remember like talking
And
to him.
Kira, and in your head, you were like, "No, I don't."
Not at all. I was like, if you only knew how like lost I am. But I remember telling him, I was like, you know what? Literally, unfortunately, we were born in very different sides of the world, and if you were born where I was born, you would be a lawyer and you'd be speaking, English. And if
Yeah.
I was born where you were born, I would probably, you know, making bread or selling what was available to me there. And yeah, I remember for him to like understand that, and for me to understand that, it's such a like reality check.
It,
um
it
yeah.
it might sound like a silly question, but do they eat white bread there? What kind of bread do they eat? Do they even have bread?
No, not really, so it's a very shitty analogy to me.
No, but the reason why I asked this question is because I was actually really curious if what
No,
do they eat sandwiches there? What kind of
no, they
snacks
don't.
do they have?
They have like they have they eat food. Yeah, they don't really have bread. And um yeah, I think the closest they would have would be, I don't even know. I remember in Sri Lanka I ate like doughy kind of sweet things, which
Hmm.
is the closest thing to bread. But in Indonesia, I don't really remember. Yeah, having bread. But like, yeah, the point was just like I would be, making something to sell as well, and
Yeah.
like focusing on university.
Yeah, humans are the same, right? It's usually the differences in opportunities you've got rather than your talents most of the time, right?
Exactly. And then I remember we decided to like exchange numbers, because I was like, hey, if you want to learn English, I can try and help you a little with that. And then I was like, okay, let's make a deal. Like every week you send me a little message about your week in English, and then I'll try and like improve it. And
Oh, that's heartwarming.
but this guy was so good at English. Like he was like his messages were better than my English, and I was like,
Can you proofread my essay?
yeah, completely. Yeah, I don't know. I think I still have the messages here. I might have a look and show you later. But yeah, those
Yeah,
are like
okay.
the cool experience I find when you travel is like when you can um have these like interactions with people that are open for it. And unfortunately, when the tourism takes over so much, they don't feel as open to like talk to you about these things,
Hmm.
which, yeah, it's
What about because I also remember there was this really good story about this father and son. Where what was it in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was yeah. So here I had literally just landed in Sri Lanka, and I had a bit of a fever and I really wasn't feeling well. And I remember I had to go from the capital city to like my first stop, which was in Kandy, which is a different city. And I managed to take the train, which was such an adventure in itself. And I remember getting out of this train station finally in Kandy. I was just like, okay, I just need to get to the hostel and I excuse me, I need a moment for myself because I'm really not feeling that great. And I was feeling a little overwhelmed because I was all by myself in a country, wasn't feeling like a very, very different country, and I wasn't feeling too well. And then I was just like, I'm just gonna walk a bit because I've been stuck in a train. And as I get at the station, I'm just like completely harassed by like a group of like men and taxi drivers and tuk-tuk drivers, and they're all screaming at me, and like really like I was trying to stay calm. I was like, listen, I really I just want to walk, it's fine, I just want to walk. And this one guy just like kept following me, and I was just like, just stay calm, like what, you're just gonna keep walking, it's gonna be fine. And he was just like, hey, where are you from? And I was like, well, I'm from the Netherlands. And he's like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, I'm gonna walk to my hostel. He's like, well, I've got a tuk tuk. Do you want a tuk tuk ride? I was like, no, no, I'm just gonna walk. I'm very okay. And he's like, I can see you're uncomfortable in your eyes. But I really just like, I just want to talk to you for a bit. And he said, like, I really, like, I felt when you got off that train, and then I saw you in the crowd, and I was like, oh my god, where's this going?
Right.
And I was just like, oh really, kind of cool. That's fucking weird. Like,
Yeah.
um,
That
but then
sounds like
he
someone who wants to sell your liver in a third world country would say.
completely, I was like, oh my god. And then he's like, well, are you here alone? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, wrong answer. Say that your boyfriend or your husband is in the hotel. And I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, just for you to know. Never say you're alone. I was like, okay, okay. And then
Wow.
he's like, yeah. So listen,
There is something dark about it, just by the way, right?
yeah. Which yeah, it's really. It's also something that really pushed me to travel by myself, regardless of all of that, because I was just like so wrong. I want to prove a point that is very
Hmm.
possible. But anyway, then he was like, okay, I've got like a lot of Dutch letters in my tuk tuk, and they were written by a friend of mine, and I haven't been able to read them because they're in Dutch, and I was wondering if you could help me. And I look at him, and he's like, yeah, if only if you're comfortable with it. And I did feel like a little more comfortable. And then he was like, yeah, just come. And I followed him to his tuk tuk, and he brings out like this massive thing with all these letters. And I'm just sitting there, and for the first time that day, I took like a breather where I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna sit and read these letters, like I'm not in a rush to get anywhere. So I read the letters, and there were like a few from different people, and they're all along the lines like, never have I met someone like um, him. He showed me what value is, and his kindness was all I needed, and he showed me his country and wanted nothing in return. He just wanted to make a connection with me, and it was all like people who had been through some sort of thing from a different country that ran into this guy and
Hmm.
shared an incredible experience. They're like, if you're reading this and you just met him, please trust your intuition. He's a good person and all of that. And I was just like, what's going on? And then
Wow, what the heck?
Yeah, and then he looks at me, and I just try and translate it a bit, and he had this like very genuine smile, very calm smile on his face, and he was like, "Listen, I really feel like your energy." He was like, "Yeah, I feel like you have good karma, and I'm very attracted to that, and I want to show you my country. I would like to introduce you to my family. I would like to show you, all the spots." And he was like, and yeah, it would be nice to share like each other's company. And I mean, at the point at that time, it was like very overwhelming because yeah, I just felt like it was a lot, and it was like one of the coolest compliments ever to say, you have nice energy,
Yeah,
which is like so beyond like what you're used to. It's like, oh, you have a good university going on, you've got like, I don't know, a good job, or you've got nice like looks or whatever, and this is so apart from all of that.
true.
And yeah, I remember then he was like, okay, I'll drive you to your hostel for free because yeah, I really just want to get to know you. Like, okay. And then yeah, from then on, he had to go somewhere, so his brother came, and then I spent time with his brother, and then his brother had to go to a doctor at some point, and I spent time with his brother's son, which was my age, and yeah, I just got to know the whole family.
That is so for a Westerner, it's
Yeah,
just so mind-boggling, right?
yeah, completely, and like it was also so hard to like you know let people know, like my family know what I was doing, because if I were to tell like my dad, for example, that I'm hanging out with an older man all day, that's
Yeah.
all to my energy, he would tell me, come home immediately. And it was like really hard to like share these experiences with people where like either people don't believe in karma, they don't believe in energy, or they're just like, you're insane, what are you doing? um and it
But
definitely, yeah.
no, sorry, but he got you where he got you where you're soft, so to say, because you're into all the spirituality, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
So he
I think,
connected well.
yeah, exactly, even more so after that moment.
Right? But how did you get into the whole spirituality thing? What kind, because spirituality is such a big topic, right? So what kind of what aspect of spirituality are you interested in?
Well, I just like always felt like I was like extremely sensitive to other people's emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always feel very drained when I'm around someone who is like actively trying to like, I don't know, make someone else feel bad, or like, is projecting like not so nice energy around them because they're themselves not feeling that good. And I then really started to like, I would feel sick sometimes. I really just like, it would really like touch me. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when I started to realize, okay, I feel very yeah, I'm very sensitive with these kind of things. And then also with my travels, I started realizing that you can feel so at ease with a complete stranger from, there's nothing you guys have in common, because, here when you meet someone and you have a click, there is a lot in common because you probably grew up in a similar way, you have similar interests or whatever. And then sometimes when you meet someone where you probably can't even like communicate in a language, and you still feel that connection, like that really made me think of,
Mm-hmm.
there's something else there, there's energy. And having people from different corners in the world talk about, you know the ability of good energy and bad energy. And yeah, that really got me into all of that.
Have you ever, and during any of your travels, had any of the local, kind of spirituality, um, mm, I don't know, culture? Have you had any exposure to that? Do you know what it's like? How is it different from other places?
Yeah, so I remember in the Philippines, for example, there was like a wide, belief in black magic and like
Mm-hmm.
spirits and stuff. And um, what we would refer to ghost stories there is just kind of like, like a norm. It's like, you've got the good and you've got the bad, and the bad is just as real as all the good. And yeah, they definitely told me, places in the island where you should not go, and you feel the chills and people's experiences there. And um, yeah, just they're probably we would say superstitious, but there it's, they take it very seriously, and it's something you don't really mess with. And yeah, they also then counter that, and they have a lot of like good energies there as well, where everyone is like extremely positive, and they're constantly like working on creating all this good energy. um
How do they create the good energy, and what were the places with the bad energy? How did they, how could they tell?
so for example, my surf guy, he had lost his wife, and I think his child as well. And very sad story, and he lived by himself. And yeah, he was very poor, and I don't think he even had that much money for food and stuff. And every single day when I saw him, he had the biggest smile on his face. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember he was always telling me, like, don't worry so much. Life is not that complicated. Just be positive. Just like look how the sun is shining. Look where we are. Look at the ocean. Look, you're feeling, you're healthy, you're good. And then he would always do his little dance, and that's positive energy, putting it out there. And there it was also like a very communal kind of living, where you could be walking on the street, and they would literally be like, hey, there's a party tonight, do you want to come? I'm like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know who you are, but yeah, sure, I'll come. And you're invited to a birthday party with like 30 different strangers, and they're like, here, have some food, have this, have drinks, have that. And like then that like energy gets like multiplied and shared and passed on. And yeah,
Mm,
that's how they do that. And then
love that.
yeah, it's really nice, and you really feel it. And yeah, you don't need a language to communicate any of that, which again
Mm.
reconfirms my belief in it.
Yeah. What about the bad energy spots? Are literally you're referring to physical places on the island?
Yeah, I never went because I'm very afraid of those kind of things. And I remember one of my friends, he had gone to a spot, and he's like, yeah, I honestly constantly felt like I was being watched. And through my surf friend, I knew exactly what part of the island it was. And I was like, did you by any chance go, here? And he's like, yeah, that's exactly where I was. And I was like, well, you felt watched? She's like, yeah, I constantly felt like I was being followed or something. And then he
Wow.
he had this thing where he said that he at one point just got like goosebumps all over his body, and he didn't know why, and that he felt so sick he had to leave. And he did not know about the story beforehand. So that's why I think like the thing with energy, like, it really does make you feel a certain way.
Have I ever told you about my ghost experiences?
No.
Have I ever never met? But if you're a bit, if you're scared, because it's not a scary experience, but it's not necessarily positive. So I'm kind of like giving you, let's say, a spoiler alert. So if
Yeah,
if you're scared of bad energy, then maybe I shouldn't share it with you necessarily. But if you're up for it, I'm gonna go
yeah,
ahead.
like, yeah, I am scared. And I definitely do like, have my little trips about these kind of things.
Yeah.
But I think also it could be good for you to share if you don't usually talk about
No, no, I love talking about it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because all in all, it's good. Like, so the house that my parents live in now is, they bought it from this guy who was, this house was almost finished when they bought it from this guy, and he was meant to move. This guy was meant to move there with his family, but his son was a a gym a gym head, right? He would go to the gym a lot, and he was doing steroids or something. And it's a really sad story. He just died in sleep. His heart stopped working or something like that. And one night when we already moved in, I was sleeping, and obviously I'm never really scared of you know anything, but I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew that like there is something in my room, and that I'm like terrified. Like I just woke up with like those two things, knowing them straight away. So it was almost like some like a different subconscious part of my brain was working before my conscious part of the brain kicked in, and I woke up. And I let I was in my bed for a few seconds, and then I kind of realized that it's okay. It was kind of along the lines, oh, you're a good person, everything is gonna be okay, no need to be afraid. And then I was like, okay, fine. And then I just turned to the other side of my bed and I fell asleep. um
Okay.
yeah, and it never happened ever after. Never happened ever after.
Yeah, because you probably did not feed into it. Um,
Yeah.
because obviously, if you stayed awake and every night you thought of that, it obviously opens up the opportunity for these things to happen.
Do you think that's how it works?
I mean, that's always what I told myself.
Mm, fair. No, but it was really interesting that I had like this strong, profound thought that you're a good person, nothing is going to happen to you. And that was it. It's like
That's
it's almost like it tested the waters and it like just left straight away. It was weird.
that's so cool. Like yeah.
And if you want one more story, so my grandma's uh, a guy who she was dating, basically
Mhm.
at the time, he had a son, and the son of his also died in sleep, on no explanation why. He just never one night he never woke up in the morning.
Mhm.
And I slept in the room in which his furniture was, you know the furniture that was in his room at the time. And I stayed at my grandma for like a week or so, and every night when I was going asleep, I was just terrified, terrified, terrified. I couldn't fall asleep for hours. I was this scared. And it's probably like a vicious cycle at some point, especially if you're a kid. But I remember it, like you would feel this weird presence. And apparently, somebody else from his family, this dude's family, his daughter or someone, her her she had she told him that he this the spirit of the son came to her and told her to tell the dad to let go of his mourning, because he cannot just move on, that he should move on. Yeah. Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
crazy.
I think like when you start talking about these things more openly to different people, you realize like how many people have had experiences in one way or another. And yeah, once you then open up that conversation, it's really hard to like ignore the fact that it exists, that it's
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm personally really curious about all those those I think superstitions. Well, it's not only that, it's part of a culture there, really, right?
yeah,
Believing this black, like magic and medicine blended all together and stuff like that. It's also an interesting window into the past, right? Because
yeah,
that's how it was in everywhere back in the day.
that's so true until it kind of got like canceled out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think this was a really, interesting conversation. I learned so much, and I loved it. It was such a good fun. So I think we should just call it a day, because we talked for, I think, over an hour. So I'm
Oh
just
my
gonna,
goodness.
yeah, thank you so much for coming up. And if you ever wanna do it again, I'm more than happy.
Yeah, if I have more adventures, hopefully after
Exactly.
this.
Perfect.